Good afternoon, and thank you for joining Business 360 for this lunchtime session. I am Roshni Gadger, your host for today. The lights literally went out on us yesterday afternoon, so to those who did join us, we apologize, but we welcome you back this afternoon. As you can see, Business 360 stands for Pivoting Strategy for Sustainability, and we had to pivot this webinar yesterday to make sure that we bring this all-important conversation to you. We appreciate your agility, your understanding, and for adapting your diaries to be with us today. The topic, return to class and the socio-economic impact of disruptions to the academic year. Education is a human right and a key factor for sustainable growth. Disruptions to the academic year do have consequences on learners and society today. It also has consequences on the economic prosperity of our future generations. What are the consequences of COVID-19 lockdown to the 2020 academic year, to the state of education in South Africa, and to the lives of the class of 2020 and young job seekers in the Eastern Cape? So today we welcome all pupils, students, parents, grandparents, educators, and employers who are listening in today. Your participation in this particular conversation is very important to us. So please let us hear your views and your pressing questions. You can do that using the chat box below. If we run out of time to take your questions or to pose your comments today, I'm going to ask our panel to work with us on this one and to try and coordinate all the questions that come through. We'll try and answer the key threads that are arising. I'm particularly keen today to hear the voice of the youth, who are the key stakeholders who are impacted by this decision to return to schools or not. So if you are a school pupil or a student, if you are listening in, please pop your name and your school, your university, or your college in the chat box. Let us understand how you see the situation from your perspective. So joining me as a co-host today is Paolo Giurikic. Hello, Paolo.
Hi, Roshni. Thank you, and thank you for that welcome. And again, welcome to all our listeners in this webinar. I'm delighted to introduce our panel today. First on the list is Sue Hageman, Key Account Manager for the Harambee Youth Employment Accelerator, Lutando Jack, Dean of Students at Nelson Mandela University, and Dr. Soisile Nuku, Acting Deputy Director General for Institutional Operations Management at the Department of Education for the Eastern Cape. So welcome to each of you. It's really a privilege to have you in this conversation with us today. As Roshni said, I'll just remind you that everyone tuning in today, please interact with us, post your questions in the chat rooms or online on Facebook, and we'll do our best to attend to those questions as we proceed through the webinar. Thank you, Roshni.
Thanks, Paolo. So this is quite a big topic, and we've got a wide range of listeners tuning in today, not only from the Nelson Mandela Bay and Buffalo City, i.e. the Eastern Cape, but further than that. So let me contextualize the situation for you. Section 29 of the Bill of Rights of the Constitution gives every South African the right to basic and further education. Section 37 then goes on to talk about a state of emergency, and paragraph 4 enables South Africa to fulfill its obligations in terms of international laws as they apply to state of emergencies. In what we can call a twist yesterday, the South African Human Rights Commission supported the reopening of schools, explaining that evidence points to harm being done to children who are not attending school. Their rationale is linked to the living conditions at home largely. There is a risk, they say, of child abuse, mental health breakdowns with the rising rates of depression and anxiety. However, if kids go to school, that doesn't mean that they don't have to go home after the schooling day and go back to that. So is staying at home providing the answers to these things when only 47% of schools in the Eastern Cape have running water? This means that more than half the schools will not be able to provide even something as necessary as running water to wash their hands, for basic sanitation, etc. If we look on the international stage, On the 11th of July, the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention warned that fully reopening schools and universities would be the highest risk for the spread of the coronavirus. The US, as you well know, is divided on this. Political interference is influencing an immediate return to schools, and they say they'll be monitoring the risks on a case-by-case basis. Learners in China are back. They started with senior schools and applied a more cautious approach to the return of grade 1 to 3 pupils. In Europe, we've seen a phased return, and countries like Italy, Spain, and Eastern Europe had made a decision to go back after the summer break in September at earliest. The outlier was Denmark, who did things a little bit differently. Toddlers and kindergarten schools were back in April already, and as opposed to social distancing, they're applying a method called protective bubbles, which enables groups of teachers and children to move around in specific groups. And also they've changed the flow of how their school campus works. In South Africa, we tried to go back in June with grade 12 and grade 7s, and we tried again in July with grade 11, 6s, and grade Rs. This week, the South African Democratic Teachers Union resolved that schools should be closed until the peak is over. But Minister of Education Mosheka says that schools should remain open. To date, the National Professional Teachers Association and the SA Principals Association confirm that absenteeism rates are between 30 and 40%. That could be higher. SA has the largest rate of infections per 100,000 people tested in the world at just under 1 in 5. When I prepared for our webinar yesterday, the infection rate in South Africa was sitting at 298,000. In just a day and a half, that changed to 311,000. So the infection rate is spreading fast. The state of affairs at COVID-19 designated hospitals in the Nelson Mandela Bay and Eastern Cape add to the rising complexities that leaders in education have to make about the return to schools debate. Parents are anxious. Vulnerable grandparents cannot form part of the support chain, and leaders in education are trying to make the most responsible decisions. Employers rely on the schools and the university systems for their skills pool, if not now, then in the near future. We must also remember that schools and universities are businesses and employers in their own right who contribute to the economic activities. Functions, events, and day-to-day academic operation also provide a source of income to thousands of South Africans and businesses who are directly or indirectly plugged into the system. Think about the children's perspective. High achiever learners are possibly traumatized by the disrupted 2020. And as students and near graduates at the universities look forward to starting their careers, the job market is looking pretty bleak. So what is going through their minds now? And how will this impact our future society? Decisions that leaders make today will impact future generations and our economic prosperity. So if, in Tata Madiba's words, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world, what should our leaders in education and business be thinking about today? And this is really what we're positioning in our conversation. So let's start with Dr. Nuku and Lutando Jack. Gents, things in education were not all well before lockdown. Universities started experiencing this, Lutando, in 2016 already. On 5th March 2020, just before lockdown, the Eastern Cape MEC Mlushungi Moko said that he admitted that Eastern Cape still faces major infrastructure backlogs when it comes to school infrastructure. At that stage, he also emphasized what he called the social ills, including gender-based violence that children are exposed to. Lutando and Dr. Nuku, you are both leaders in education, and this is a very complex situation in an unprecedented time in humanity. Dr. Nuku, your Department of Institutional Operations sits alongside curriculum development. And Lutando, from your side, I've often thought during this period that universities, because of what they faced during fees must fall, may possibly be more resilient. So from where you're sitting, What is the position of your institutions on this matter? What has informed your leadership's decision-making over the past 100 days? And then tagged onto that question, to what extent can you provide a safe learning environment for pupils and students at the schools? Let's start with Dr. Nuku. Doctor?
Thank you so much, Roshni, and good day or afternoon, colleagues. Now, indeed, this is a very, very, very complex issue. Now, in concurring with you, Roshni, before COVID-19, schooling in the Eastern Cape was continuing under the conditions that you have already stated. Infrastructure challenges in some schools and the like. Now, but since the start of lockdown, we had to change at the department and do things differently because we were no longer allowed to go to schools and conduct formal schooling as usual. And then what we did was to look at the online way of teaching and learning, which was a mammoth task in the department because remember, this was really a paradigm shift. Now, what we have discovered is that as we have been doing that before schools reopen on the 8th of June, learners or children from some areas that have network, they would connect easily and get our beamed lessons. But those learners who are from the areas where there is no network, they could not benefit. Hence, the next step that we did, we actually provided them with hard copy materials to ensure that they are benefiting from learning, and also began to use radio stations and the like so that they can benefit. Now, which means the whole issue to me, Roshni, is not more about opening or closing of schools, because during COVID-19, you can hardly talk about normal schooling where learners are all at school, schooling in the traditional or conservative way. But now you're talking of a situation whereby everybody has anxiety to say, if I send my child to school, what is going to happen? I fear for this situation. Learners are also hysteric about this whole situation. Now, but of course, those who are at school, we actually adhere to the COVID-19 safety measures. And number two, what we are doing, Roshni, is to say that during this period, we need to explore more as the department ways and means of ensuring safe learning even at home now, which is now a very, very paradigm shift in our schooling system, because homeschooling has been there, minimally in the department, but now this is the route we are exploring more than formal schooling. Thank you so much, Roshni.
Thank you, Doctor. And if you look at it from the teachers' perspectives, can you give us some insights on how they're seeing the situation?
Thank you so much, Roshni. You see, on the side of teachers, we have experienced a lot of anxiety, as I say. The majority of teachers are on normal sick leave because they fear to go to school. Now, number two, during COVID-19, you have applications, or you have many teachers applying to be exempted from formal schooling because they have comorbidities. Then when you approve these applications, obviously learners will be at school without teachers. Then we have a plan to employ substitutes. Then a substitute teacher, whom you employ at this time of the year to teach a very difficult subject in the exit grade, again, is a mammoth task, which really indicates the fact that online way of supporting learners is the route we have to explore as the department very, very strongly and vigorously. Now, teachers with comorbidities are at home. We have approved that they be at home. Now, those that are sick, they are sick. So which means the whole issue of schooling during COVID-19, if I admit, is not at all a normal one. Hence, I'm saying that as the leaders of the department, we are now putting in place alternative ways of ensuring that learners learn, because the issue here is not about opening schools, closing schools, but how do we ensure at the end of the day the learning of learners where they are? That is the debate now, and thinking in the Department of Basic Education. Thank you so much, Roshni.
Thanks, Dr. Nuku. Let's go to Lutando. Lutando, did Fees Must Fall prepare you better to navigate through this, or is it as complex?
Thanks, Roshni, and good afternoon. Yeah, I think how we view what we are going through as society, as a country, and the world could be really characterized as dealing with contradictions, and as you Apple also referred to, also managing complexity and uncertainty. From where we stand, there is only one thing that is certain. It is uncertainty, and the sooner we realize and accept that as society, the better for all of us. So in the context of the current crisis we are facing, so we saw it as a continuation, but at a larger scale, of complexity and the management of dealing with contradictions. But in the context of the university, we also saw it as a period or as a moment that tests our value system. And as to whether, as a university, we're going to stay true to what we believe in. And at the center of that value system, for instance, is social justice. So the approach, therefore, that we had to take was, we've got to make sure that as we traverse these uncharted waters, we've got to journey together as the university community. We've got to journey with our students, we've got to journey with our staff, we've got to journey with everyone. And in that context, we had to therefore adapt quickly good practices of 2016 brought about by Fees Must Fall, and then develop a hybrid learning platform, for our students. An approach that really combined learning online as well as learning from home, utilizing other methods other than online learning. But with respect to online learning, it was not as easy as that as well, because it also had to be enabled. You needed essentially three things in order to be successful learning online: data, device, and connectivity. And given the unevenness of our country in terms of connectivity, what is called digital divide, so not all our students, for instance, they would have data, they would have device. We're given data actually to all our students, but then there would be the challenge of connectivity. So we had to therefore provide a comprehensive support system that ensures that wherever our students are, do actually learn. But the majority of our students did enroll to learn online. We had to, as I said, we had to provide data. We had to also provide devices to those students who had no devices. For instance, we provided more than 5,000, just in this period, more than 5,000 laptops, to our students. But of course, because of the contradictions that I referred to, we couldn't deal with the aspect of connectivity because it is outside our own control. But all of that had to be underpinned by what I would call success factors, like communication between our students and the lecturers, commitment to want to succeed. Our students had to want it, had to want to succeed, and they've been quite resilient, you know, in this regard. We had to have virtual support system in the form of a psychosocial support. Our staff had to work beyond working hours so that they can provide support to our student whenever it is necessary. And we're at a point now where we are almost completing the first semester, you know, of the year as a university. But it has been a testing journey, lots of lessons, but working together, we have traversed up to this point. Thanks, Roshni.
Thanks, Lutanda. I think you were mentioning to us that about 2,000 students are back and learning online. Is that correct?
No, we've got about 76% of our students who are enrolled online.
Right.
So the overall majority of our students are learning online. But what we did, we provided devices, for instance, to more than 5,000 students. So
Okay.
so that's a decision that had to be taken in the past 100 days, as you referred to.
Thanks, Lutanda. I mean, Sue was telling us earlier that her son, I think, is writing his final exams today. So that's testament to that. Dr. Nuka, before we go to Sue, I just want to ask you, you know, based on what Lutanda has explained in the university situation, are these types of risk mitigation measures in place at basic education, yes or no? And secondly, are there funds available to mobilize the online learning opportunity as you referred to? Once again, yes or no, so that we can get to Sue.
Okay, you see, these mitigating factors that Lutando is articulating on higher education, you know, some of them we do have perfectly. Now, on the issue of the budget for online learning, we don't have enough budget, to be honest. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let's bring Sue into the conversation, Paulo.
Yes, so thank you. So it's been super interesting to hear the views of the learner level, then the university student level, and now the natural next piece is to look at youth employment. So I'm going to pose this question to Sue, which is to please give us a feel for what Harambee does and also some context on youth employment in the Eastern Cape pre-COVID and perhaps post-COVID.
It is now.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to all our listeners. So the work of Harambee is to find solutions to youth unemployment that are sustainable, which means that they can continue without having to be propped up and ongoing outside help, and also solutions which can be scaled, which means that many young people can benefit in a cost-effective way and not just a privileged few. We've tackled this challenge using partnerships and data and innovations and on-the-ground experience. And in our almost 10 years, we have learned so much about what is required to pathway young people from learning into the world of work and earning. And we have so far pathwayed over 172,000 young people into opportunities, which, when you think that there are 6 million NEETs, N-E-E-T-S, not in employment, education and training, it's a bit of a drop in the ocean. However, it does give proof of concept of what we hypothesized and set out to show, which is that young South Africans can be successfully brought into the world of work without significant experience, because a lot of things that employers are looking for our young people don't have, and we needed to help them close those gaps. So that's the work of Harambee. To your first question, we've also had to pivot. All of our centres, which are all around the country, are actually closed at the moment. So we've had to. But Harambee is very much open for business, and we've had to go online. So it was very fascinating listening to your stories, because we had to finish some close the gap interventions and actually pivot from people who'd been in, on these close the gap interventions with us to an online situation. We also had a lot of learnings in that area. To your second question, Paolo, about pre-COVID employment situation, and some very heart-shattering news actually came out yesterday. A further 3 million jobs have been lost in South Africa since the start of COVID, and 2 million of those people were women. So the loss of jobs is actually hitting those who were previously battling the most. It's actually hitting them the hardest. So they were concentrated among those who are already disadvantaged. And I believe we've actually now tipped to, we've got more people unemployed than employed. So our work is all the more important, and we've actually spent this time doing everything we can to protect jobs. So just as an example of a pivot, so you asked what's the pre-COVID and the current situation. So one of the things that we did as an organization to try and shore up jobs was we supported the Unemployment Insurance Fund with their TERS payment system, and about 500 of our team actually manned the call center, releasing the UIF people to do the actual transactions to help disperse those funds. So the situation post-COVID, or now where we are and going forward, is very bleak. But there's a lot of hope. There's a lot of work that we can do, and a lot of things that have almost been catalyzed by the situation that's taking us into the future where we needed to go. So I'm keeping it short to answer your question now, but we can also talk to solutions. It's not only doom and gloom.
Thank you, Sue. What really strikes me is that there is a bit of a silver lining here. Although the employment rates have gone down and people have lost their jobs, it's allowed you as an organization to perhaps flex and be different in the way that you could almost scale what you do in a way that provides people with the skills that are needed to enter into the world of employment, assuming that they may not get to a tertiary level of education. So, as you said, not all doom and gloom.
No, to speak directly to that point, we have been appointed as the pathway manager for the President's Youth Employment Initiative. And the ultimate goal is that there will be a platform where young people can have vision of what opportunities are available, what is required to position themselves to be eligible for those opportunities where they are, pathwaying opportunities, because we've come to realize it's not a straight line from where you are to where you'd like to be. It's more of a zigzag. And so young people who are listening in, all the skills that you've got, you might not start off doing the kind of work that you'd envisaged one day as your way to make a contribution, but you can use some skills that you have now to earn the money to do the upskilling or the studying to get you to where you want to go. And
that makes total sense, because I guess if you just, people just need to get into the employment system to see a huge level of socio-economic upliftment. And it sounds like that the work that you're doing provides that step, and the partnership with YES.
Yes.
And the partnership with YES must be really important.
As well, is part of that, yes. When you say just needing to get into the system, our first hypothesis was simply that young people lacked networks. And that was the first thing that we tested and found it very much to be true. So that's one of the roles that Harambee has played, has been a network between those who have opportunities to invest in young people and those young people looking for opportunities to help us, almost like on a dating site, find each other. But we're no longer a dating site. We've now become Netflix. in that you let us, as you join the network and you let us know and discover more about you, we can then nudge you and prompt you towards the things that are going to best pathway you into the zone and the area for you to make your contribution and especially to earn.
So super interesting.
Sorry, Paula, just if I can ask a question, just something that you said struck me. Lutando, are there any linkages between the university and the Harambee/Yes program at the moment? So you was talking about expanding the network and almost creating those linkages.
No, we've been working with Harambee around our youth development convention, which is an annual initiative. But we are now wanting to create cells, if you like, or labs around youth development. Cluster young people who are interested, let's say, in social entrepreneurship to work as a group, you know, such that then the Youth Development Convention is used as a platform to showcase what is it that could be done, you know, in that particular area. Cluster young people who own enterprises in townships to work together about share their experiences, what is working, what is not working, and then come into the youth convention to basically showcase that type of experience. So we're wanting to work with Harambee as well as other youth organizations in this regard. So that's the work that we are doing, and there are also other initiatives in terms of just looking at what it is that could be done in the context of COVID, basically looking beyond COVID with a particular focus, you know, on young people in terms of fashioning new capabilities that they may need to thrive in life, you know, that they may need to reinvent themselves, you know, in this changing world. Because I think that's what young people really need. They don't need just a degree. A degree is important, but a degree alone is not going to make them succeed in a dynamic and ever-changing world. So you do need such complementary skills, such as critical thinking, collaborative skills, creative thinking skills, problem-solving skills, entrepreneurial skills, communication, human relation skills. So that type of work really needs to be done. What we're doing in part, that type of work as the university, but we can't do that work alone without working with partners. Thanks, Rosh.
Thank you. So safety means more than just a PPE and washing your hands and wearing your face mask. Safety in this context also speaks about emotional safety, to go back to school, to go back to work, etc., to go back to the classroom. Paolo, do you want to perhaps pick up on that point?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. So, I mean, as a parent, and wondering whether I should send my child back to school, I'd like to bring the parent voice into this conversation. So I'm going to reflect on some of the very strong views in the chat group at the moment around literally just closing the schools, because people are putting remarks on the chat group around the fact that sending children back to school is really quite detrimental for parents in terms of the health perspective, and that the spread of COVID can really happen through children and really unabated without even knowing. So I'd like to bring that up. So we've got people saying that we should close schools for the entire academic year this year. 1 year lost is really nothing in comparison to life lost. And we've got other people saying that what we need to do is push the digital agenda. So we've got a specific comment from Gerard Retief saying that online training is probably the way to go. But I guess the fact that we need to zero rate data would become really important for most communities to be able to sustain programs on an online basis. And I guess people simply don't have the know-how yet to a large extent to be able to push through an online agenda. So if I just reflect on my own experience, my son's school, he's a grade 3 learner, is offering parents at the moment the option of either an online world of learning or an in-person learning and trying things out. So I guess I'm sitting here wondering what the answer is. I really don't know what the answer is. I guess at an anxiety level for the virus, it makes sense to almost be staying home, but not everybody can have that luxury, and children's emotional well-being is really of utmost importance. So I'd like to sort of, on the lines of those thoughts, pose to the panel your thoughts, given the strong views of our listeners.
Should we start with Dr. Nuku?
Yes.
Dr. Nuku, what's in place so that both the teachers and the pupils feel safe to go back? And then, you know, on the opportunity around online learning, yes, we can adapt and do something differently, but we've got to also keep our lights on to do that, like we saw with our webinar last night. So, you know, how would the schooling system in the Eastern Cape go about doing that, and how well prepared do you think you are to deliver on that promise in the short term and then perhaps in the medium term?
Okay, thanks, Roshni. You know, next week, Monday, we are phasing in grades 3, 6, and 11. And what we are doing is that as the system, the reason why we're phasing in these grades, you know, incrementally in that way is for us to be sure that whatever we are doing, it is in line with COVID-19 regulations, which is one aspect. Number two, we are orientating we have a program of orientating both our teachers and learners when they come back to school. And not to mention as well the strong psychosocial support services that we have solicited for our schools so that we deal with the anxiety. We deal with whatever we can do in line with COVID-19 regulations. Now, the next item is to ensure that we firm up this issue of online learning, as I've indicated. But in addition to that, we have actually made it very strong that we are communicating with parents, with teachers, and with learners. Those learners that will be, for any reason, not be able to come to school because either of the fear, because of the comorbidities or whatever. The bottom line in the department is that we want to ensure that learners at home, they are provided with work to do so that the year progresses. Now, as I've indicated, you know, inter alia, that we have on one hand online learning, but number two, we have you know, hard copies or traditional way of dealing with those that cannot access the online learning. But quickly, Roshni, as the Department of Basic Education, we are in a transitional stage, something which we did not do before. Now, which means as we go on next week, other lessons we are learning as we go, we plan, we fix, we go. Now, for an example, you know, we were actually saying, you know, as the system that if for any reason the debates push us to closing other grades of schools, other grades, and only concentrate on grade 12, already we have purchased tablets for all grade 12 learners in the province. Number two, we have also communicated with the Department of Water and Sanitation to say, provide water and sanitation to schools if we are to continue with our schooling. And number three, we have also spoken with the Department of Communications, because it's their responsibility to ensure that the Econet network, throughout the province. So, and lastly, Roshni, in terms of us ensuring that we provide learners at home with what they have to do, we have actually packaged curriculum, for all the grades that are opening in a manner that if a learner is not opened or is unable to go to school, the school is able to provide parents with work to be done so that we continue in that fashion. And lastly, we are beginning to see that there are good Samaritans heeding to our call as the Department of Basic Education in the province to say that in terms of connectivity, we can advise you, to go on in this way because it's not an easy task to buy data to do this and that. So those are just concrete things that as the Department of Basic Education, we are doing in, as we are facing in other grades to ensure that no learner is not learning because the parent has chosen not to send his child to school because of fear. Of course, as I say, psychosocial support services are there in schools to really curb the issue of fear. And very, very lastly, we have made a clarion call as the Department of Basic Education for a word-based support community mobilization program so that the issue of COVID-19 is a much spoken about issue, especially in the structures locally. Because some of the issues that we have picked up as the Department of Education is that people sometimes don't even know what to do with COVID because there has not been thorough orientation and understanding of what COVID-19 is in our communities. So we have actually made a clarion call to all stakeholders, which we are meeting as the basic education schooling system on Saturdays. Every day on Saturday, we have a meeting with stakeholders to say, this is what to do with the Joint Health is advising us. Go on and orientate people, talk about COVID-19, school people about COVID-19 so that they understand that we are living with COVID-19. Then what then is our life during COVID-19? Thanks, Roshni.
Thank you, Dr. Nuku. And that's interesting that you're having weekly stakeholder sessions to create better information and awareness out there. Lutando, sounds like universities are a little bit further down the line because they have had time to adapt to a previous experience. If you were to give basic education some advice, being 2 or 3 years down the road on the part of having adapted your curriculum, preparing your lecturers, and preparing your systems to offer a different type of teaching and learning methodology, what advice would that be, Lutando?
Yeah, I think the advice I would give Roshni is we really need a new type of a teacher to teach a learner, of the 21st century, who's a digital native, and most of the time, teachers that we have, some of them are digital immigrants. So you really have got to have an accelerated program of reorienting teachers to be able to teach this new learner, if you like, who's a digital native and who's likely to work in a world that is largely driven, by technology. And you've got to also make requisite adjustments, to the curriculum. The curriculum, of course, must not only talk to technology, but it must be a curriculum that really articulates well between the basic and higher education, as well as what is now called the new world of work. So we've got to have a flexible, agile education system, as a country, not a fixed education system that is difficult, to change. I think that's what is really required if we are to really cultivate a human capital for the future, and a human capital that is going to be able to enable our country to compete amongst nations, but most importantly, a human capital that is going to be able to help resolve the contradictions that I mentioned earlier on, the fault lines that are there, in our own society, like issues of the digital divide, issues of inequality, issues of poverty, and so on. Thanks, Roshi.
Thank you,
Carter.
Lutando.
I see you. Sue, I just want to bring you into this conversation briefly. You're at the other end where pupils and students have come through the educational system. What is the mindset currently of young job seekers today?
The mindset, sorry, when you say the mindset of young job seekers, obviously young people are very keen to get a monthly income. And the way that we look at employability, we've actually, from all our learnings, we've devised what we call an employability map, where we see that there are 6 elements to one's employability, which, in addition to sort of fundamental qualifications or almost job requirements, where we can bring in qualifications and that, there's socialization for the world of work, behaviors for the world of work, and certain fundamental skills for the world of work. And that's where I resonate with a lot of what Lutando just said. We need to prioritize digital skills. We need to prioritize access to connectivity and equipment and digital skills. So those are the areas that we need to close the gap on. I noted earlier, I think Lutando mentioned it as well. It's in the area of thinking, the ability to problem solve and to do certain kind of cognitive thinking. That are gaps that we need to close. So we're wanting to help young people understand. The other 3 are geography. You need to be close to where you are so that you're not spending enormous amounts of time or money getting to or from work. Is general interest and inclination, and then the demographic requirements of the job. So some of those things we can't close the gap on, and we can't influence. But what we would want to say, when you were saying what would we speak to, we'd love to talk about demand-led skilling and understanding where the zones of opportunity are in our country when you talk about how to help us to be a global competitor and what makes sense for South Africa to, and we have been to attract, kind of work to attract, we have been identifying these zones. If we could all get together and collaborate on these are the zones of opportunity, and if we could bring our young people to a place where they understand and excited about and are skilled and able to go into those zones, that would make sense. And I think we could work together to make the system work all the way together to position our young people to take up those opportunities and to attract those opportunities to our country. And we've also, one of the other things that we've tested are agile funding models and ways of spending that drive the acquisition of the skills that are needed. We tested using social impact bonds so that people actually paid for getting what was required. And that actually worked really well in helping to get everybody to innovate and channel learning and skilling and equipping in the direction of where we could bring in work, like in the BPO sector, in the digital sector. There are a few sectors that we've identified. So your question was, what is the view of young people. Funny, one of our main learnings when we had to pivot to online was the first main learning. I'm just referring to my colleague's notes because she put it in, and the article is available on our website, was about putting young people at the center and really, really listening to their feedback. And our team has been amazing in doing this. And I wanted to mention, Doctor, you might already be aware, but one of the things we did was create a huge amount of content. We started off trying to reach 3 million young people in 3 weeks when we thought lockdown would only be 3 weeks. So it's now become the 6 million project, but there's a very large amount of content that we can share that you can use in your ward-based approach to help build the community education and listening to young people's voices. They were right in the beginning, they were most interested to understand COVID-19 and its implications. They were very frustrated with fake news because there was so much of it, and they needed to find sources, reputable sources. And now attention has very much shifted to what can I be doing to be positioning myself to find work, where are possible work opportunities. And the voices of young people are telling us they're very much looking to find work and to have a reason to get up every morning and somewhere to go and be part of a team. Even if you're part of a team working online, there's so much more to work than just the monthly earning amount. But it often starts with earning and then moves to really finding the love of how we're meant to work together. So sorry, I hope I've answered your question.
You have. Thank you, Sue. I want to bring Paula in. Paula, are there any comments from our young listeners that we can position right now with only 10 minutes left?
I don't think that it's young listeners. I think it's more of the parents. So I'm seeing another two comments coming through to say, really, to open schools for the sake of future economic prosperity, that is no concrete enough reason to justify this gesture. People are saying, let's rather have another academic year and have people live. That's going to land up being better prosperity economically for the future. And then the second comment is really around the fact that even if we go through an online learning method, these things take time to implement. They take time for people to get upskilled on how to use them, exactly what Lutando has said and Sue has said to an extent, and Dr. Nuku. So there's going to be lost time in setting up digital channels and getting everyone up and ready. So again, is the answer just to close the academic year and start again next year? Those are the comments coming through, not so much questions.
Thanks, Paolo. So Minister Mvoko in March already said, he referred to the quarterly labour force survey statistics of the fourth quarter of 2019 that indicated high unemployment rates in the Eastern Cape, up to 39.5% compared to the benchmark of 29% in the country. Eastern Cape has so much potential. It has such a warm culture with its people, and it has really respected educational institutions. Yet to date, we haven't been able to unlock this prosperity in our province. So, Dr. Nuku, you know, the purpose of your department, which is the branch for coordination and institutional operations management, your purpose is to oversee the management of education administration and the coordination of institutional transformation, which is exactly what's required right now, perhaps. Lutando, the NMU exists to change the world. And Sue, Harambee aims to solve youth employment through partnerships. So, you know, my final question to you would be, if you were advising the president on the 2030 sustainable education model for nation building, what would you table as the top 3 priorities for better alignment between education, society, and the economy or business? Let's start with Dr. Nuku.
Thank you so much, Roshni. Now, my first top priority is the collaboration between basic education and higher education. Because to me, the type of a teacher that we need in the basic education schooling must be a discussion and agreement between us as basic schooling education system and higher education. Because obviously, you know, institution of higher learning must have an influence in what is happening in the basic schooling, because we are preparing these learners, you know, for the job market. Number two, the strong partnerships between our basic education schooling and the business. Because, you know, not everything can be done by the Department of Basic Education. And also, you know, as we are now moving, you know, technologically, we need business to come very strongly with business advices and some technical skills, because a lot of these new things to us as the basic education schooling system have been, you know, practiced, you know, in the business. And then number three, the whole collaboration and integration among government departments, so that we ensure that everybody or every government department is doing what it is supposed to do to impact on the life and learning of the learner, and also in the welfare of both teachers and learners. Because so lastly, the whole issue of schooling, both in the basic education and also in the issue of higher learning, is really a societal issue where everybody, you know, is looking at education as a means of life for each and every child in the household. So which means therefore,
Thank you, Dr. Nuku. I just want to get Lutando and Sue into this. Thanks for your passionate response. And my thoughts there are, there's a short, medium, and long-term plan. So right now, I think there's a lot of anxiety and uncertainty in the system, but medium to long-term, there certainly are opportunities around co-creation, collaboration. Lutando, change the world and education, what should we be thinking about? Top three.
Yeah, I think we must recommit ourselves to prioritizing education and health as a nexus for human development. I think COVID-19 has reminded us about the centrality of health, you know, in our lives. Number two is activation of everyone as agents of their own development. So agency is important, so that we move away from a dependency type of a society to a society wherein people feel empowered to lead their lives and live the type of life, you know, they desire. And then the last point, I think, is one that Dr. Nuku made about a social compact. I think, given the fact that almost all indicators are negative in the country at the present moment, I think we need a social compact that is going to bring us together and unite around a shared common vision about the future. And I think all of us, we must stop. I would suggest that we stop interpreting the new world using old maps. Thank you.
Thank you, Lutando. So can we link agency with ownership and accountability to convert those plans and intents into actionable items over the medium and long term? Thank you, Dean. Sue, I think we'll convert our 60 minutes to 67 minutes, seeing that it's International Mandela Week. Please, can we hear your top three?
Thank you. Not in a particular order, because I've been very impacted by what people are saying, but so we want to give young people, we were talking about, we want them to take agency. We also want to give them visibility, much more almost democratic visibility of what is available. So that because a lot happens in a black box. A lot of work that's possible isn't advertised. That was why we needed to be a network. So the pathway, a way of managing pathways and exposing pathways, we think is very important. I'd like to add to Dr. Nuku's point where he said a collaboration between basic education and higher education and very much and the world of work. Because I listened carefully, that was different to your second point. Your second point was a bit about the world of work helping education, but actually it's back to that point about demand-led skilling. And then within that, and we maybe in education, we need to look at a way of micro-credentialing things so that there's a faster, more accessible, less expensive way of being able to signal your abilities into the market so that you can start doing things without having to wait and not earn over a long period of time, like for a degree, which we think could help construct. I mean, it would be great if they added up to something. And I wrote another point about agency. Young people are, in our experience, actually amazing. I mean, there's an amazing initiative going on called Youth Solving Youth. And when brought together and listened to and given the chance, you actually be amazed how much young people are able to solve for things themselves and make things happen. I think they could go a long way to solving, working in teams and working together and getting through, tutoring each other through education. So I definitely think the other big piece of advice is to keep the young person right in the middle of the conversation and keep their voices louder. And I think that talks to the point Lutando just made about not using old school ways of looking at things. So those are the points I'd like to add.
Dr. Nuku, Lutando, Jack, and Sue Hageman, thank you enormously for your time. We know that you have other pressing priorities on your agendas at the moment. So thank you for being flexible and opening up another hour of your time today after we couldn't have the webinar yesterday. We really do appreciate it. Listeners, thank you so much for you joining us today. And we didn't expect to answer all these big questions, but rather to position the nuggets that we need to start thinking about as leaders in education, in society, and in business. Because as all our panelists have said, that the youth today are our future generation. So the world celebrates International Mandela Day this Saturday, and we keep the Mandela family in our thoughts as the passing of Zinzi Mandela this week. She was the ambassador to Denmark, and she unfortunately passed away of COVID-19. So in Mandela's deep respect for education and his love for children, I leave the young learners and job seekers with one of my favorite quotes from Tata Mandiba. And he said, "There is no passion to be found in playing small, in settling for a life that is less than the one that you are capable of living." So we'll see you next time. And until then, please let us have your comments, your feedback. And I believe that's available to you on your screen if you look at the bottom. This is important to us, and I'm sure that you still have questions that you'd like answered, that you'd like to be positioned. And as we said up front, we'll ask our panel to work with us to try and respond to the emerging themes. Please follow the Herald Live and Daily Dispatch for details of our next webinar. Remember on Saturday to make your 67 minutes count. And in leaving, in whatever you plan, decide, or do, let purpose and sustainability always sustain your purpose. Thank you.